2006, presented up to 45 minutes of the results back in February 2006. And there's much more to present. So he's going to do a quick recap, and we're looking at audience participation here. And I want to thank Stephen for all the work he put into what you will see is obviously a very extensive survey.
Mm-hmm. Thank you kindly, Dennis. So we figured we'll, for the benefit of people who weren't here last year, I'll re-present the slides and maybe take 20 minutes on that. Then we could have an interactive discussion in as much as people want to. And then when that peters out, then we can break up into groups. So just to get an idea, how many people got this talk last year in May? May, I think it was May. Okay. Pretty sure it was May. Okay, so we're just trying to zip through these things. So I checked the list membership today. There's actually now 400 members, 397, 303 fully subscribed, 96 digest. So things have moved on even more since. So this is the state of things as of April, May 2006. So we had 103 responses to this survey, 83% response, counting 130 active members, which is our tally of who came to meetings. And this had changed to some extent since the last time we ran it in March 2003. And so I tried to present some slides to tabulate what I think are people's points of view and interests, but anybody who wants to get access to the SQL data, I'll probably make that available anonymized, so you can do that. So people wanted to know, why are we doing this? Why are we collecting data? What's the point? Why should I care? Why should I fill this in? And so it was basic logistical stuff. So, okay, so people complain about, you didn't cover my favorite topic or my favorite package. Or is anybody else in this group interested in, a certain application on a certain platform? So we wanted to quantify who is and who isn't, and what are the really sort of niche-y things that only a few hardcore are really interested in, and what are the broad interests that haven't been covered yet. And then how do we migrate that into inviting speakers that we know will be of interest to people, speakers that people know, that people like, have seen before. Where do we need volunteers? What are the issues internally that the group needs to organize, those sort of things. So we had some basic questions about people's level in Python and how much they use it. So we've got a sort of a very broad cross spectrum of users, from complete newbies, which is fine, to PSF members and everything in between. And sort of it splits up into people who use Python more than 50% on the job and less than 50%, and that kind of splits evenly. So there's some hobbyists, some full-time developers, some multi-skill developers, different profiles like that. How many meetings people attend a year? The median of this is so we have 24% of people who are list lurkers who don't come, and that number's probably increased quite a lot. 29% of people who only come to less than a quarter of the meetings. 32% of people come to less than half of the meetings. So the median of this is pretty low. So, we asked for constructive discussion on, is it that the meetings are hard to get to, or you're not interested, or you really need them to be advertised earlier so you can carpool, or just that the topic doesn't interest you. We got a bunch of opinions on that. As to how long people have been a member of the group, the sort of shakeout of this was that 72% of the people have been members for less than 2 years. So the membership really is changing radically. And in fact, you can see it from the graph. So as the venues have changed and time has moved on, so we're now here. If you can extrapolate from 160 to 397, then that's where it is today. So I don't. So therefore, we'll fill all the Google campus by the year 2015. So this is I don't want to dwell on this one. This is, one of the contentious issues, which is where do people like to have the meetings? Everybody knows that. If you've been on the mailing list for more than a month, you're aware that this is a very passionate subject. I was going to try to suggest we orient the discussion tonight towards more basic stuff, like simply topics, speakers, organization, that sort of stuff. This is like a sort of higher function we can aspire to. So that's in the slides. You can refer to that. So then we had some other surveys of platforms that people work on, which IDE, things like that. It's not massively relevant. So one of the most important things was what are people's objectives and for the group, as in either the email list or the meetings or both. What do they want to do, and also what format of meeting do they prefer for those who come to the meetings. So this is some arbitrary ranking, numerical ranking I had to give it. SurveyMonkey allows you to pick a score, which is an integer. So on a capricious scale of 0 to 4 or 1 to 4, so the most important thing to people is learning something new, then staying current, getting current community buzz, meeting Python people, hearing from Guido directly, and then sort of a score of 2 is moderately important. So other stuff, networking, job shopping, social stuff, meetups, other unspecified things, recruiting, publicizing, demoing your package, book, or course. And there's an in-depth breakout of these things later on. So you'd see this. So when you ask people what are the topics of interest, so this is maybe the most useful output in terms of what do people want to see and what were they personally prepared to host. So language internals, advanced Python, core features, web frameworks, Python language, future, standard packages, they're like of extreme interest to almost everybody. So I think they're well hit. The things in blue, in light blue, are things that haven't really been covered. Okay, so some of that is a little bit out of date, but so for example, some people expressed interest in profiling and refactoring and code efficiency, which hasn't really ever been covered of itself, except in passing by, say, people like Drew. So then there's a few other things. Build automation. Build automation, release, and testing is of interest to a lot of people, especially if I understand rightly, Google folks. So I don't think, would you disagree? Dennis? I believe so. I say build automation it's of interest to quite a large bunch of people. I don't think it's ever been covered. So we know the people are out there. So, yeah. And then a whole bunch of standard topic areas, everything from business logic, databases, compiling, IDEs, cheese shop distribution, how to package something for distribution, more content management frameworks like Plone, which was supposed to be tonight's topic, text processing, things like XML, CGI, and so on, GUI methodology. So then, sort of topics of moderate interest. We maybe bring this slide up later if we're discussing. But there's a whole sort of universal cross-section of things that people are interested in. And the most important thing about this is most of it hasn't really been covered in a talk here. Everybody's enthusiastic about something, so most people are capable of speaking about this stuff. Everybody has maybe slightly different niche interests. So for example, when you talk about evangelizing or commercializing Python, startups, segments, business studies, venture capital, what's getting funded these days. So that's maybe something that's of extreme interest to some people and maybe not to others. So all of these potentially could be built out into a talk if people were willing to make it happen. And then this is stuff the final list of stuff that's of niche interest or it's of strong interest to a small bunch of people, but generally not. So, for example, there are people who do Iron Python. There's a few of them. They say a lot of good things about it, but again, it's never been published. Personally, I'm interested in electronic design automation, chip design, CAD, scientific applications, but many other people aren't. So the take-home stuff about this was there were some topics that are of general interest, some topics that are for newbies, some for advanced. There are pretty popular topics that haven't ever been featured. I think functional programming still wasn't, unless I'm wrong. GUIs is always popular and has never really been, as in, not just my favorite GUI, but how to build a GUI application or a survey of designing with different GUIs, that sort of stuff. and porting as a topic in and of itself, databases, things like that. And then there's the niche topics. This is the sort of SIG material, special interest groups maybe, so stuff that bores some people but is interesting to other people. Animation, scientific usage, that sort of stuff, job hunting. Python in education is something that popped up in the last 18 months that a lot of money is starting to go into this, and with the Macintosh distribution of Python, it's sort of reaching critical penetration in the education sector. So other suggestions that people made, these are individual suggestions, so they may or may not be popular, but certainly would be worth throwing out to see how much interest they generate. Sort of non-lecture formats, code sprints, other formats of activity. So then I asked this question about usefulness of Python resources. I thought it might or might not show some interesting trends, like some people always use the list or some people always use the IRC. But this actually sort of generated an interesting side effect question. Is a lot of people said, what are these things and where are they? And I never realized there was a Python tutor list or that sort of stuff. So in and of itself, a review talk of these are the main Python activities, and for sure OSCON and PyCon are really popular. Most people can't get to them, and because they don't publish the transcript, so we're sort of wholly dependent on people who go there to tell us what's hot and what's not. This is a sort of a comment that's been kicked around a lot. What are the preferred meeting formats, or what do people like, or what do they not like, or what would they like to experiment with? So the sort of monolithic one speaker technical talk or detailed presentation from the podium, that's one format. It's sort of marginally the most popular, but the second priority was people expressing a preference for all of the above. People suggesting several speakers on various topics. And so the consensus was it didn't really matter. People didn't really care if it's one speaker or several speakers or whatever. They just want to make sure that the speakers sort of practiced before and that the presentation will be interesting and that they'll get something out of it. So there was a suggestion you can sort of give new speakers a 5-minute or lightning talk sort of audition, and that's a good way to help see if they have material and if they can capture the audience. Interactive workshop and learn-a-thon, it's an interesting proposal. It takes a lot of organizing or coding sprints, so it's heavy duty, requires a core of volunteers to do it. So if it's going to happen, it would need a group of volunteers to drive it. So then snippets and lightning talks are useful. It was done in the past. Anybody who writes some cool applet and wants to show us something particularly clever they found, or a book review or a mini conference talk, something like that. And then the other formats, Q&A formats, discussion, roundtable, quiz, whatever, special interest group, breakout discussions, and other things. People are interested in social activities as well, and some people have expressed interest. Yeah? Mm-hmm.
You expressed at one point that you were surprised that book reviews were not as popular.
Sure.
I haven't seen that on the slides. Is that not there yet?
Would you please repeat the question?
Sure thing, yeah. So whether book reviews are popular or not?
I didn't see any justification to your statement that they weren't popular. I'm not sure where that is.
Yeah, it's it's a good question. I mean, we didn't list it as a separate activity. We thought 5-minute talk covers it. And yeah, they're perennially popular as long as the book is of general interest and the person can present it well. And so Tony, I don't think he's not here, but so Tony Capolini is coordinating that. So at the moment, the book reviews go up on the website, but there's no email notification. So I think it would be a good thing if somebody has a review of something broadly interesting. So this is where the rubber hits the road. It's like, if we put a gun to your head, what topic could you volunteer to speak on, or what topic would you be least unwilling to speak on, or what can you do for us? So a lot of people answered, which was pretty neat. So, whatever that is, 87%, which is pretty cool. Or they recommended other people who they like and have seen before, and so we got some names. And, that's one mechanism. And so we got some other things. For example, Pixar said yes, but as of last year, they had a major rush on, so they said, come back, talk to them, 2007. Various other things. Asking Guido to give a talk is kind of like it's taking the easy option out. So we should be able to be self-perpetuating now. Django, so Jacob Kaplan-Moss came here last year, and that was pretty cool. So this is an interesting section. And so now we have some comments that make interesting reading. Yeah, some of this stuff it should not be necessary for adults to have to make these comments to each other, but various comments that might or might not be still relevant that discussed what was going on last year. But so I think the consensus is if the meeting is organized and starts on time and is of a topic that interests people, then they like that, and if it's not, then they don't. Comments about organization. There was a highly interesting comment later on, something about moderate one here. I understand the need for the high volume on the email list, but hopefully some of it can be taken offline in executive committee in the near future, which is sort of betraying an assumption that isn't valid. So if you have a group, as we do, which is essentially has no formal structure, and is a sort of ultra democracy, then really anybody can propose anything. So several of us had made the comment sometimes that we would like to move towards a formal structure and have a charter, elect officers, not out of some power craze, but simply as an effective way of scaling and not beating everybody to death with the minutiae of how to organize a meeting or that sort of stuff. So people's comments about the format, I mean, the big deal is there is a multitude of comments and there's no consensus, but people would like most or many people would like to experiment at the formats. Some people like the current one; they think it's just fine. Some people would like to change some of the time. The discussion about the location again is kind of moot, but it'll always be out there. Meeting planning. Meetings need to be planned further in advance. Note the use of the passive tense. I'm sorry. Did you have a comment? No. Okay. Sorry. I thought somebody did. The group should be more proactive to seek speakers, even out-of-town experts. So we have one inanimate abstract noun and one passive tense. So useful comments. I wish I could attend more meetings. Volume on the mailing list itself, that's it's a historical comment, but the fact that you have to discuss stuff on the mailing list is, in my opinion, a manifestation of the fact that we don't have officers, we don't have a charter, so you have to run everything by everybody all of the time, and disagreements happen, and then sometimes heated discussions happen. So that's going to continue to happen until we change the structure. It's just a necessary evil. There was quite a few good comments about how to organize the mailing list. Filtering, top posting, don't include everything, don't include the entire last week's digest. Some comments about various people, policies about off-list discussions or cross-posting, for example, this week. And there were some comments about the website, and the perennial stuff pops up about, clarify the topic well in advance, publicize it, the location, the time, that sort of stuff. Various comments about the aesthetics, positive and negatives. Some people love Plone, they want to use it. Some people don't. Some people want V-calendaring. Many people don't care as long as the website simply communicates the information in a timely way. Some people suggested creating a community space on one of the social networking sites, and again, some people want to do that, and some people would like to show who they're networked to and have a link to their website, and some people don't for privacy reasons and stuff. So this is probably not relevant since we're not organized enough to be able to do this stuff, so we should probably pass over that gently. Stuff I learned from running the survey, from bottom to top. Explain to people why they should care, why they should answer it, what's in it for them to help us orient this. If you don't get a high response rate, so you have to bribe people to get a representative survey. And you've got to get enough detail out of them to understand what they really want. So what I found is the closed format questions where you ask people to choose are hit and miss. If you really do your homework and you find out what people's, say, top 30 topics are, then you can get a good answer. But if you give them an open format and say, what are the top 3 actions that you would like to see the group take or that you will personally volunteer to take in the next year, you can get some much more focused answers. So, as I say, question design, it's not trivial. Some people complain about SurveyMonkey itself. Whoever wants to volunteer to run the survey next time it runs, whenever that is, you can bypass the limitations, but you can only ask people so many questions with so much level of detail. Sort of sweet spot is maybe 20 or something. So if anybody actually wants to write a survey engine, which would be a cool and neat thing to do and is actually quite non-trivial, so if it's capable of handling SQL and generating HTML output, so it was a suggestion. So I can see the volunteers are lining up down the corridors. And then there was a sort of meta discussion, and this is the sort of thing that if this happens on the list, then it irritates some people, or if it happens at meetings, then people say there wasn't a consensus and they don't know what's happening. So I'm simply going to state, based on people's comments, that there's no formal mechanism for making decisions. Legally speaking, there is no Baypiggies, as Dennis was pointing out with respect to the PyCon 2008 proposal that Russell is looking into. So
Russell's looking at what?
the PyCon 2008,
What am I looking into?
the PyCon 2008 proposal. That's right?
Someone else.
That's somebody else.
Oh, okay. Alvin, sorry. Okay, my mistake. Yeah. So, but legally speaking, we don't exist. To what extent that matters. We got some useful feedback from Rich Moran, who's a guy who only comments on the list, and he's very active in a bunch of scripting SIGs. And he pointed me to Rick Moen's essay on linuxmafia.com about how to organize your Linux user group. But he has some good comments, and he's saying, you need as much or as little structure as people want, and targeted to their needs. So, if pizzas and raffles are what attracts them, then do pizzas and raffles. And if you want a full shebang 20-page charter with corporate officers, then do that. But so that was a comment. But you can see everything in that list has a question mark after it. So I'm still not aware that there's a consensus, other than a large number of people voice criticisms. But then you go back to them and say, okay, how would you make the group better? And then you get miscellaneous answers. But one of the most common complaints made by people who are on the list but don't come to the meeting. So it's, do we have to universally discuss everything? Can we delegate? Maybe we shouldn't. Can we appoint leaders with define their responsibilities? Is the whole thing non-scalable? So is it order of n squared to the number of people in the group, the number of discussions that can break out? And so this is Rick Moen's essay. And some comments about off-topic list volume, and if that was a necessary evil, if it really means people are plotting against each other, or simply that some discussions are not worth or educational enough to be put on the list. And then there was a meta discussion about do we need to split into a Baypiggies announce for the people who are on multiple SIGs or only come to the Bay Area rarely and only want to know when's the meeting on and what's the topic. Baypiggies jobs for people who aren't interested, don't need to subscribe, an internal organized list or something like that, and people who actually want to talk about Python. And so then some further principles based on what people said. Since the group doesn't legally exist, and since we never said what our charter is and what our aims are and what they aren't, then there is necessarily difference of opinion about what they should be. Is this a technical group? Is it social networking? Is it both? Which community are we serving? Do we have a charter to have, say, newbies evening every now and then? But also we want to have expert talks as well. Do we encourage, how do we encourage new speakers? That's something that used to be done. It was good for participation. Personally, I think it was pretty cool. And as I mentioned, things like book reviews or code snippets are a great way to get somebody to present something new and tell everybody who they are. And then the controversial opinion, meetings are never cancelled for lack of technical content, which is something we've flirted with in the last few months. So I'm sure everybody has a different opinion about that one. And then I quoted some flippant and completely useless thoughts. Everybody agreed somebody should do something about it. In the end, nothing happened, which is a principle and has a title, The Collusion of Anonymity, which is very impressive. And the alternative, the Ashanti proverb, 2 men in a burning house must not stop to argue. You can decide for yourself if that's completely irrelevant. So what did we learn? Well, we still know the topics of interest, but since then, so some of them have been hit, some of them haven't. Some of them were opportunistic. For example, it was great that the Django guys came to town, so that was pretty neat. Should we focus on things that we know are of interest to people and haven't been addressed before, or perennial favorites where we know that we have hardcore speakers who can talk about something that we know will be interesting? Who is responsible for inviting speakers? Is it each of us, or should we delegate this? Should we have some defined program managers? And so Dennis is handing over to Jim, right? So it's a sort of ongoing question. Whether we should mix up the format, whether we should keep it as is, whether we should try 2 or more speakers on the same topic or on different topics, depending on the popularity. The perennial stuff about logistics, which is, nail down the meeting early, define the speaker, define the topic, define the agenda, communicate it to everybody so that, for example, people who want to carpool from Oakland don't get annoyed because the thing has changed at the last minute, stuff like that. So obviously I'm violating that. So, and then another question, which isn't really satisfactorily dealt with, so identify where are volunteers needed, who we need to do what. So volunteering for a talk, inviting other people, that sort of stuff. And so also other things like doing a PyCon 2008 bid is going to sort of hit the same question. How many people do you need to make a certain activity happen? So to recap, the point of the exercise was understand who's the member base, where is it going, what do people want, what are their interests, what level of organization do they want and what do they need it to do, where do we go from here, which is just, it's as much an open question really as when I threw it out. And so now maybe let's have the interactive discussion part. So I think we have about 30 people here tonight.
Might I ask that, one, that the speaker repeat whatever's asked, and 2, that people who want to ask questions go up to the microphone?
Yeah, cool. So anybody got a question? Dennis, okay.
This is not so much a question, but an alternate interpretation of one of the slides where you talk about what people are interested in. First, let me note that the questions were asked basically before I'd started organizing sessions. So the list of complaints against me would be different. They aren't up there yet. And so maybe that will come out in discussion. Go back one more. Or where are you, the format, yes.
This one, yes. Or the format.
I think
this one?
that, yes. I'd interpret this as saying that there's very strong interest in technical presentations. Let's take a mix of all of the above temporarily. The top four that remain then are all presentation or educational in nature. And the ones that are at the bottom are all social, many-on-many kinds of interactions. So that you see that if we can take out mix of all of the above, that the professional presentation rise to the top and the many on many fall to the bottom. Now let's put mix of all of the above back in. I think that you would need to apportion that by what's risen to the top and what's fallen to the bottom. They aren't all equal, and I think that my interpretation is that there's a preference for technical presentations.
Does anybody else want to comment on that? Yeah,
Can I ask you what
yeah, sure. Can you go to the mic, please, Chad? Oh, okay, sure.
What's that scale, or what are those numbers?
Yeah.
Can you repeat what he said since
Sure.
you go to the microphone?
Sure. So what is the numerical scale of this table? It's an arbitrary ranking from SurveyMonkey. So basically, 4 would be is of extreme interest to everybody, and 1 means none at all. So 3 means very interested, and 1.83 means not really. But just to point out, I mean, these are not exclusive. I mean, you can have a beer and Python bash meetup at the Thirsty Bear in San Francisco on a Saturday, and that's, it's not like everybody's fighting for the 1-hour time slot a month, so, or 90 minutes. Sharina?
Hi. So I'm totally new to this, so I have 2 questions, I guess. Did you ask how people found Baypiggies? Because it seems very random, how people find this thing, which of course is as it should be, but it's interesting to see how many people find the website, or, is it word of mouth and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And the other thing is, have you guys seen growth? I saw there was growth on the mailing list on subscribers. Has that growth been reflected in the actual attendees here? I'm just curious whether you have doubled here as well as on the mailing list.
In the meeting attendance?
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, so that you can't get the historical server logs previous to 2006, but it's kind of increasing exponentially with sort of hiccups. Cool. Do you want to tell us how you personally found the group? Through Google?
Started a project called Plone.
I'm sorry?
So started a project called Plone.
Okay, sure.
You might have heard it. So I heard it from Whit Morris, I guess. He used to live in the Bay Area, and I'm sure he's been here a couple of times. Mm-hmm. And he said, you should really go to Baypiggies now that you work at Google. So, all right?
Yeah, sure. I mean, there are certain packages that are Python-centric that, or Ruby-centric, or, there are people who are sort of agnostic, and it's like the package attracts people to the language. So, I was even talking to a friend of mine recently and saying, have you considered using Plone? And he basically said, I don't care what language it's based on as long as I don't have to write any code. And I mean, he can code, but he just didn't want to, so, So yeah, it's not a bad question. It would be well worth. Yeah, sure. Russ?
I'd like to speak in favor extremely of the snippets. Another organization I have been to is called the SV Lug, and they had a thing called Nifty of the Month, which unfortunately I think has faded away to my disappointment. But I sort of see snippets and Nifty of the Month as similar things, and they're short, and you can possibly even write them down and maybe even use them.
Is that like American Python Idol? Yeah, we need a sarcastic English judge and substance-taking dancer. But no, yeah, seriously, it's like the question people ask about that is, do you just set a line in the sand and say we're having snippets evening in April, come hell or high water, and everybody get cracking, or what? I mean, so if we said tonight we're having snippets evening in April, so every month, one thing. So I mean, it could be popular. The traditional. I'm sorry?
They were usually like 5-minute presentations.
Yeah. So a snippet evening where you have 25-minute snippets? Or?
Well, one each night.
Right, one each night. Yeah. I mean, at least historically, they sort of bundle them all together. No, I mean, there's pros and cons. It's if we want to, we can suggest organizing it and get one person next month and see how it goes and get a reaction. Chad, yeah.
Can you go back to the list of topics that people were interested in?
Uh-huh.
Please.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So, first of all, if you haven't already done this, it'd be good to maybe repost this or a summary of this. Although it's actually a really long list of topics.
Yeah.
You know, which is maybe good for getting people to, if they have one of these that they might want to give a talk about, get them interested. But it also, it seems to me you might want to have a smaller list of topics, sort of.
Yeah. In fact, the original one was twice as long, and I had to amalgamate them. And believe it or not. So.
Yeah. You know, again, I don't want to give you the job of, or anyone the job of having to redo a survey, but it's sort of like, you know, are you interested in Python web technologies versus Python, you know, data, you know, technologies or whatever.
Sure. Yeah. If anybody can help me, I was trying to sort of distill this. I was asking the question. So if you did do SIGs, so there's web framework folks. There's core technologies. There's language fundamentals. There's, let's say, XML. There's animation. There's numerical scientific engineering usage. And then there's other things like, say, packaging distribution. So
yeah,
it would be neat to distill this into subcategories. But please help me. Send me a comment, or I'll put this out on the list within the next few days. Please do send me your feedback on that.
Yeah, so I'll probably post to the list as well, because I have a sort of a few ideas for either topics I might want to give or talk about, or just get people to give me some feedback and maybe get other people to talk about them. Some of it which is like this, like snippets type related things, as well as other things. But I was wondering if we have anyone has. By the way, my name's Chad. I'm a long time sort of attendee of these meetings. But I've been gone for over a year, so I'm sort of back recently. But and I'm very interested to see all that's changed in the past year. Now I forgot my question. But what was it? I knew I should
we decided to become the Ruby interest group, and
what? So actually, Ruby, by the way, having been away for a year, I come back and there's a lot of interest in Ruby now. Ruby is, along with Python, is sort of really growing by leaps and bounds. It's getting a lot of attention. That would be, frankly, a very good topic if someone who is sort of knows Ruby and is looking to Python or vice versa. I'm actually looking for some of the things I'm doing. I'm thinking of porting them to Ruby. Just A, to get used to Ruby, and just B, because it maps so well. It's sort of like, if you have a good idea in Python, why not do the same thing in Ruby?
Yeah, Ruby on Rails keeps coming up, and people keep saying, hey, somebody should give a talk about Ruby on Rails. I don't know why it hasn't happened yet. But.
I've noticed, I think the very last item on that list, if you go 2 pages on, is Perl. Right.
Yeah, but but again, right, so this is where I was going to sort of like calculate, it's not just the mean, the standard deviation. So what that really means is, there's a bunch of people who use it or have to use it, have to be multilingual, like me and other people I know. A lot of web people, you're forced to do this, or you want to use libraries that don't exist or aren't mature or stable. So, some people do use it necessarily and some people don't. So one crossover topic I was suggesting is Perl to Python migration. And there's actually a pretty okay book on that, which I think is in its 2nd edition.
Yeah. So actually, now I remember sort of what I was talking about is, A, do we have sort of a good idea of what people have honestly proposed maybe for the upcoming few months to sometime this year to actually talk about? And B, it would be nice, or it'd be interesting maybe, to have, everyone's willing to talk about the kinds of things they'd like to see a talk on. But without necessarily committing people, it'd sort of be nice to say, well, like, if you're interested in contributing, what could you conceivably talk about? Without committing to actually doing a talk yet, but like start thinking about like, if you were forced and someone said you have to give a talk on Wednesday, it's your moral duty, what would you talk about?
Yeah.
And sort of getting a list of what those, in other words, what skill sets and knowledge and so forth, what experiences and that do comprise the people in this group who could present. And I think that would help to sort of maybe narrow some of these things down and start to get it more concrete and getting actual talks scheduled and done and so forth.
Yeah, no, totally. And I mean, one of the ways I was trying to narrow it down is give people, here's the top 10 list of topics we know are of general interest that haven't been covered. So, you can, so you can read them off here. So,
yeah, I see that, in the pie charts, we have sort of like 50% of people I think who are new to Python and just kind of want to network and
Yeah.
find out more about it. And then you have 50% of people who maybe use Python at work or just have been using a long time
Yeah.
and might be able to do sort of these advanced topics and so forth. And I know that beginners would love to hear advanced topic discussions, even if it's seemingly over their heads. But at the same time, you know, getting people to do beginner level talks is sometimes difficult. You know, a lot of people, if you think you're, you know, you have all these really neat stuff that you're doing, you don't want to come in and sort of go over the basics. But I think there is some interest in people. It's kind of like going back to this Ruby versus Python. So like, why do I use Python? Why do I love Python? And a lot of people are coming in sort of saying, I think I love Python, and you know, but I haven't. You know, I looked at all the library features. I don't know what they do. You know. Those types of talks, I suppose, are hard to get scheduled. But anyway, the point is, I think it's, you know, I'm certainly, now that I'm back, I'm sort of willing to help as well as I can, but, you know, getting concrete talks or actual talks proposed for the year and then starting them scheduled, at least getting people thinking about what they're going to talk about is, you know, is worthwhile. It'd be nice to, I know you would say, but, you know, it'd be nice to be able to say that for the month of February or March, we have 2 talks lined up. If one person can't make it, we have the other person.
Sure.
If one goes over, or these types of things, you want to always be ahead of the game. And I think if things have grown as much as they have, I think we're getting to that point where we should be able to have people who can talk.
Yeah.
Look at me, I can talk at length on anything, right?
Sure.
So anyway, I'm done. That's
No, I agree. Dennis wants to comment.
I'd like to point out an opportunity which we didn't see when this survey was taken, which I think really affects what we set as our goal. And that opportunity is that we now appear to be videotaping and distributing these talks on a regular basis. It took a while to kind of get in the groove so that the talks would actually get videotaped, as Stephen well knows. Because his first talk wasn't videotaped, and just sort of slipped through. But we're pretty much now in a groove, and what that means is that we can have worldwide English-speaking scope. Right? In other words, if someone can understand English, they can download the video and watch it of the technical presentation. So that gives us an opportunity to evangelize and teach on a scope that was simply unavailable to us before. And I think that we really ought to be factoring that in to what we attempt.
Yeah.
I wonder who's hosting that video.
That's such a reasonable range.
Posterity?
Yeah, look at the URL when you run this, and that's who's doing that. I think they prohibit using the Google name, right?
Hi everybody, I'm Wesley. I've been a member of Baypiggies since 1999, and we were meeting in San Francisco. Does anybody remember those days?
Yeah. Oh, no.
Up in the city?
Just after that.
Up in the city, you used to have to drive all the way up there, and now people in San Francisco have to drive all the way down here. It's kind of interesting. But just to follow on Dennis's comments, that because we're videotaped now, the location thing doesn't really mean as much anymore. If you can't make it, you can at least watch the videos. But yeah, we're missing 1999 and 2000, but we were up in the city for a while. It's quite interesting. So as far as talks are concerned, the easy months to schedule are February, March, and August. Did you guys know that? Because of PyCon. PyCon happens at the end of February, so usually the February talk is always it's a warm-up for people that have to give talks at PyCon. So we usually have 3, 4, 5. I think last year, wasn't this one in Ironport where we were in the dark? Where multiple people were giving their previews of their talks, and the power went out at Ironport, so we were doing it in the dark. That was probably the most interesting, one of the most interesting meetings we've ever had.
The Great Python Kiss Chase at Ironport, yes.
Right. And March is easy because someone's going to give a wrap-up talk on what happened at PyCon for all those people that missed it. And although the O'Reilly OSCON isn't as popular as PyCon in our community, but there is a Python track at OSCON, and so in August we usually have a wrap-up of what happened at the Python track at OSCON. So those 3 months are pretty easy. So we should be done for February and March for this year, as long as we have volunteers who are giving talks at PyCon to come talk next month, give a preview of their talk just to warm up for it, and some volunteers to come back with a write-up of what happened at PyCon. And I think in April, I don't know if you guys are open to this, but I think Alex, myself, and Oz have volunteered to give a panel on experiences writing a technical book on Python and all the trials and tribulations that brings forth. We were throwing it around ourselves and discussing, when is Oz going to be able to make a meeting? And so he said April would be the first month that he could make. So I'm going to try and hold him to that. But that's something that's kind of interesting. That's not technical, but you know, everybody specializes in a field other than Python, and if you have the interest or the urge to write, it'd be interesting to hear what other people say about it. So,
do we in fact have anything March?
March should be the summary of PyCon, so somebody should volunteer for that.
Okay.
I mean, I can well, it's really easy to say someone should volunteer for it if you know, but having an actual volunteer is a little bit more difficult because people don't, you know, are pretty shy. I mean, I could give a summary, but I can only give a summary of the talks I go to, you know, so, you know, I'd be glad to do that.
So do you,
yeah, who is going to PyCon? Did you guys get all my message today?
So we have
about early bird registration is ending.
I'll be happy to present on some of it when I come back.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so there's 4 people,
so
so
Drew,
that's at least 4 people that can at least say, you know, a quick 10 minutes, you know, talk on a quick 10 minutes about the talks that they went to. Is anyone here giving a talk at PyCons to see if we can fill out our February calendar? Okay.
Well, we might have plans for that.
Right.
We might.
Okay. Well, that's fine too, especially if there's no speakers. I'm not giving a talk this year. I'm maybe giving a tutorial, which I could turn into a talk for this if you guys are all interested. But
what's your topic?
I'll be discussing Win32 and how to do COM client programming, how to connect to Excel and Word and Outlook and all that kind of stuff. It's not, you know, a lot of people don't like to talk about non-open source software at these meetings, but you know, if you have to play with Windows in your work environment, it's kind of good information to know. So I can always give a talk. If there is always a need for a talk, I have like 20 talks that I've filed away that I can always pull out in an emergency. So I'm always a willing volunteer as long as my wife lets me come.
Yeah.
Okay, it's not gonna be that bad. I actually have talks. I mean, if we have to get really, really bad, I created a talk on how to play craps. Okay, I have a full PowerPoint and graphics and everything, as well as a demonstration spread. So I have all kinds of interesting talks.
Are you driving through Vegas on the way to PyCon?
No, but we do have a user that lives there. You see Michael on the mailing list. He actually lives and works in Vegas. I used to have a house there, so we're pretty familiar with that area.
You're just trying to make it tax deductible, aren't you?
I'm just saying that there are so many topics. Just look at your slides. I mean, we should have 12 months easily just from one page alone.
Yeah.
So it's just getting people to volunteer, you know, and not be shy or have stage fright. You know, think of it as Toastmasters kind of a thing. It's, of course, I'm saying this because I've been teaching for 20 some odd years, so I don't, you know, I'm fairly comfortable in front of a microphone, but you know, it's a good way to break out of that shell because nobody knows who you really are. You can pretend to be somebody else, and just talk about something that you're working on. You know, whether it be work, professional, hobby. You know, everybody has an interest and everybody has a specialty in some area, even if it's strange. All right, or what you think is strange, other people may not, and vice versa. So,
I mean, I had 2 thoughts about how to make it a reality. And so, you know, so the first is start them off by saying 5, 10, or 15-minute talk. You know, snippet, flash talk, book review, whatever. And get a bunch of people, get like 6 people in an evening, and then people can say, I really want to see this person present again. And the other thing is something I'd suggested, which sounds trivial, but just advertise whether the level is, expert, advanced, beginner, intermediate, or universal. So for example, I had an experience where I invited somebody to one of our talks, and I thought it sounded like a newbie talk, but it turned out to be really, really advanced. And my friend he's not a Python programmer. And he said, can it really be this complicated? So it actually negatively evangelized him to go off and find a new language, which was kind of depressing for me. But so hence, that's why I was suggesting advertise the level that's expected of people. And if you let it, the argument in favor of saying, let's have a newbies and snippet evening is saying, new users are encouraged, you're welcome, people aren't going to laugh at you if you don't know what the command to read a line from standard input is, bring all your friends, bring people you want to evangelize. So that's one argument. Ken, yeah? Do you want to use the mic?
That if a lot of people are interested, I can probably throw together a 5-minute lightning talk on a little kind of a module to get started on writing a WX Python app in about 15 minutes.
Yeah.
The talk would be 5 minutes, and writing your application would probably take about 15 minutes.
Okay, so you get thumbs up
Anyone
from Drew
interested in that?
and me.
Do we have
Yeah.
time
Sounds
today
good.
to do it?
Sorry?
Do you have time today to do it, or should I do it another time?
Do we have time today?
Slightly more.
Are you prepared?
I also have a really short thing.
Yeah,
Sure.
I can throw together.
We can. Okay. We can do, what do you think? It's 8:20, so we're going to, okay.
Well, yeah, my feeling is,
Mhm.
you finish up, let's not, because that would be crowding you. And the other part of it is that there's nothing on this notebook of your talk, so there's going to be some notebook switching time too.
Sure. So maybe add in a,
Let's Stephen.
well, we let the discussion run until
Also,
we stop and,
might want to hear it, who will come next week.
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
So yeah, if the discussion ends soon, then maybe, I would say. Mm-hmm.
I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Jim. I don't want to bore you. I want to keep it brief, but I think I should introduce myself. I wonder what I should say.
So Jim has kindly volunteered to be the organizer? Or?
Well, I volunteered to help. And I want to say, I think it's important, I'm not a coder. I like engineers and talking to engineers a lot. And I really want to be supportive of open source, generally. I just want to add my little help. I'm a little ant joining all the other ants, and I push it in. With respect to this group, the kinds of things I can do is to call people up, email them, kind of try to get it together, remind them they're supposed to be there for the meeting, whatever that's supposed to be. I got a rather extensive experience in docs, so I could help you with this thing I care. I could help organize. I did a lot of training, so I can help with that if that's wanted. I can't come to every meeting. I don't know anybody who's a Python coder except for 2 women. I don't know who uses Python, what enterprises, except for Plone. But I do want to help. So the expectation I'm hoping to set is that you'll use me as your helper. You'll, let me know what's going on and coordinate, and we'll work that way. I think I've talked tonight.
Sure. And I mean, I agree with you. Actually a review of which companies are Pythonic, where is it being used now, what are the killer packages, is a great start point.
It's to talk to me. Hello, everyone. My name is Li Bo Cao. I think Wesley was talking about me because I've been here a lot of times, but never said anything. And I probably, now I'm the only girl in this room. Anyways, I used to be a research scientist for a chemical intelligent instrument company, and I've done a lot of programming in MATLAB, LabVIEW, and C++. the reason I was using Python is because there are some algorithms. The research field I was in is chemometrics. So there are many pattern recognition type of algorithms that I want to develop and share it with other people, but I don't want to use any commercial or something to take me too time consuming. So I wrote probably only 2 or 3 kind of algorithms that I use daily for like principal component analysis, partial least square analysis in chemometrics to separate component in solution. But that's
so that's signal processing library stuff, yeah.
Yes, and then after I wrote it, I realized that somebody else already wrote it, and I could take it.
In Python?
Yes,
right.
In Python. And now I'm working for Dash Navigation, and it's a GPS company. A lot of things were written in Perl in the last of the list. So I was thinking I could wrap it up using Python, or someone could give me some tips on that. So that's about me. My feelings for this group, I wish it could be more educational, because I've been here a lot, but my most impressed presentation was given by Alex at Foothill College, because that's the most technical one. He was talking about the iterator, and I think I learned a lot from that presentation. We could do a lot more like that here. I think the reason that we are not doing too many of that is because people taking the technical presentation too seriously. It doesn't need to be. It could be people like Leslie or Russell. They're doing Python every day, and I'm pretty sure that they have something new to share every day. Just like little stuff. I'm doing this module, and there's something that I haven't noticed and haven't used, but it's really cool. It could be just several minutes of sharing of their daily job for experts like them. It will be really helpful for us newbies, and because I did waste some of the time just because I don't know there's something out there, and I didn't bother to do this research.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, when you say educational, you mean to find out who's working on what and what's a cool package.
Yeah, what's new out there? What did you learn today? Even little bitty, small things. Like I was using Google's bathroom, and there's, the things you could learn on the toilet seat. So I think I learned.
She's talking about testing on the toilet.
Testing on the toilet. Yeah, little tips.
Unit testing.
Yes, that's really educational. And I really like that because I was just reading it, and I think it's a good thing to know, and just spend a few minutes here and there by listening to experts. We can know more about unit testing or whatever things that I never heard, and I could just pointers pointing me to this website or pointing me to this resource, that I will just know it's out there and know I need to spend effort to know more about it.
Sure. So yeah, I mean, some things that have been tried or talked about for that. I mean,
right. It would be great to have the little brainstorm like that for like maybe 10 minutes as a routine. Either experts or newbie, whoever has been doing Python in that month, and have little things to share.
Yeah,
that'd be great.
Sure, yeah. So I mean, Dennis had introduced mapping at the end of the meetings. If you've been to the previous meetings, where anybody who mapping means at the end of the meeting, people who have an interest or a shared interest or are looking for people or want to solve a certain problem will tell people and say, so if you know how to do this in this package, come and talk to me. Which was good at making those links. The other suggestion was if we were all on some sort of a social network, then you can index your name against your interests and your activity, your day job, your
exactly
that sort of stuff.
And also, I'm just new to the navigation system type of programming. So if anyone here is an expert on GPS, like Python graph, I haven't done my research yet because I was overwhelmed learning the stuff, new stuff. But if anyone who is really familiar with using Python to develop graph and maps, I would love that if you could introduce yourself to me. And
And I think
so
at this point,
you
going for
are.
So let it go.
20 minutes.
Let it
My
go.
name's Drew, and I've done
Okay.
Python to GPS to Google Maps.
Oh, that's awesome! I would love
I'll
to
show
tell.
it here next time.
Okay.
So
Who do you work
maybe
for?
maybe someday.
So who do you work for?
DreamWorks.
You work? Okay.
Wait, that's not how I'm doing this.
Mm-hmm. Sure. That's
I think maybe someday you can have a presentation on GPS if you are gonna do one, and probably in half a year or a couple months I can do one. So that would be something we can contribute.
yeah. I mean, GPS is one of those topics. It's of interest to a small bunch of people. So if you advertised it well in advance and cross-posted it to other lists, so it's kind of it's independent of the language. So
Yeah, and actually our dash navigation GPS is the special one because we have internet connection, Wi-Fi transfer from the GPS to your desktop, and from desktop send your address and intercommunication.
yeah, I mean, so if you can drag one of your marketing folks along to give us
Yeah, you can search Yahoo logo.
the advantage of why dash is better.
Right, find the cheapest
Yeah.
gas station around you.
Indeed. So Wesley points out that if you want to cross-post, you have to use the special secret protocol.
Yeah. Okay,
Okay.
that's me. Finally, introducing myself.
Thank you.
I'm the shy one that Wesley was talking about and has been trying to get me to introduce myself to other people.
Okay, cool, great. And sorry, this dude, can you tell us your name, please?
Because I'm the girl.
And sorry, can you tell us your name? Your name, please?
Yes, my name is Alexander Limi. So I thought I'd
the
give
Plone guy.
proper introduction instead of just mentioning that I founded Plone.
The Plone father.
So my history with Python kind of goes back to when Zope came out. I started doing Zope around 1998, 99, and I couldn't figure it out. So I started doing user interfaces instead, which is what Google has hired me to do. So I don't actually do any Python at Google, which is interesting. I don't really know any Python. I can read Python, but I don't really do it because there are so many good programmers out there that do it way better than I do. But I love the fact that I can actually read what they do. And that's a huge, bonus to me as a UI designer because I can go down and I can say, I think let's build a B tree that gives me this information and I can see what kind of information they give me back and I can construct a UI on that. And if I'm missing anything, I know that this is possible by doing this in Python. So furthermore, history. For some reason, we ended up implementing a content management application on top of Zope. I know Zope is this kind of weird parallel universe for most Python people, which I don't blame you. Zope 2 is really, really, really a weird parallel universe. There's a new version of Zope out now, has been out for a year or two officially, which is Zope 3, which is more like a collection of Python modules, which makes much more sense. Currently, Plone is moving everything from Zope 2 pathway over to Zope 3. So we're in the interesting position where we're making a lot of money on Plone. It's very much a business compatible thing. One of the classic things I say, if you want to do Python for a living, do Plone,
And then actually, sorry, that's a that's a non-trivial question. So a lot of people are asking,
right.
Python is neat and all that, but
Yep.
how do I chuck
Right.
the day job and find something that I can do for a living?
Exactly. So one of the things I keynoted PyCon last year with Alan, which is the other guy who started Plone, and it's pretty strange to be keynoting PyCon and I don't know Python. So that was an interesting experience. We mostly talked about non-Python stuff, like I don't know. Plone is kind of we call ourselves the J2EE Liberation Army because a lot of our people that do Plone now used to be in these huge companies doing J2EE And then
Did I mention I work for Sun?
Exactly. So
I do hardware at Sun.
Exactly. So, so one of the things we've done is that, we've shaken up that space a little bit, and people that are, themselves or with a friend or something like that, they start a company, and 2 years later, there are 30 people doing Plone full-time, So it's an interesting approach, and I've spoken to Guido a lot about this, or not a lot. We've discussed it, how, Plone becomes a gateway drug to Python, just like SOAP used to be a gateway drug, but at this point, SOAP is too frameworky for people to work with. They want instant gratification. They want something running in 5 minutes. And
the no-code 5-minute killer application.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, as Ruby on Rails, they say. Yeah.
So, which is a different approach. That's more like building it from the bottom up. We're building it from the top down. We give you something that works, and then you go, oh, this almost solves my problem, and then you start digging, and then you're like, oh, Python, So that's an interesting other approach for bringing. I believe you have some people here that have come to Python through Plone, which it makes me very happy, because what I always say to people, even if you end up not using Plone,
right,
stick with Python. It's great,
Yeah.
I don't care if you use Plone or not, but keep Python,
You're right. I mean, that's a question we must start asking. Is like, did you come for a killer application, or you're well aware of what Python is, but like,
right,
terminal disenchantment with Tickle or Perl, or was there a killer library?
Right. So we had an interesting situation. Sorry if I'm rambling.
No.
We had a period where a lot of people came to Plone because they wanted to build web applications, because this was before Django, TurboGear, stuff like that. So we kind of took all those people at that point. They came through Plone for some reason, just because it did something out of the box. And now that Django and TurboGears are here, I'm super happy both about those and Ruby on Rails, because earlier on we had so many people that were trying to not do content management. And they came to Plone and they're like, I want to build an issue tracker, And of course you can build an issue tracker in Plone, but you shouldn't, If that's the only thing you're building, you shouldn't use that. So, exactly. So, but it is a very like specific problem-solving thing. It's a very broad problem, but it's still, there's a lot of stuff. I love sending people to TurboGears or to Django now, because they are not trying to solve our problem. And it makes the world better if we're both in the right slot. So,
so for example, I know this is the missing, case study evangelism. So I know people who downloaded Zope and played with it or looked at it and scratched their heads for 2 weeks and chucked it because they didn't know how to, do hello world or, and it happens. And unless you have that, the last mile, then you don't connect with the potential audience, and they all go off to, C# or something.
Yep. So why I'm here, I mean, I don't necessarily want to learn about decorators. I appreciate that they're there. But I want to just, get a feeling for what's going on in Python. Also bring Plone closer to Python. We've had a lot of people lately coming from Python into the Plone world. And a lot of people that started with Plone have become, Python experts because they really liked what they found. So that whole tying that closer together, making everything more sane, more lightweight, more modular, stuff like that, which is happening with the Zope 3 transition with Plone now.
So that's like the evolution of Zope and Plone.
Kind of, and the de-evolution of Zope. The best thing they did was to rewrite that thing. It took forever, but the people behind that application have this amazing domain knowledge, and they can start fresh and not worry about time, because Zope 2 is making us money right now. Zope 3 will in the future. And very few frameworks are capable of doing that stuff. Like, we chose to not rewrite Plone from scratch because it would be insane, and you can't do that. So what we do is we switch out modules one at a time. So the next release will, rip out the internationalization structure and a couple of the other structures and replace those with new components that do the same thing. We have a very test-heavy culture, which is also interesting, which is why we can modify the plane in flight, because we know the tests run. Oh, okay, so then at least the application did what it used to do, And in theory, of course, you don't never have perfect test coverage, but there's a lot of, I don't know, I know way too little about Python compared to what I should. most of what I know about Python I get from either engEDU or, funnily enough, it's engEDU that got me working here. So.
Is it internally C++?
What?
Is it internally C++? Or?
Yes. So anyway, where I think I can add something is, running a community. That's what I've been doing the last 5 years with Plone. Running business on Plone. I started my own company 3.5 years ago, I guess, which is still running. Doing Plone consultancy, but I mean, the lessons there apply to any Python consultancy or whatever. I mean, organizing things like conferences, sprints, stuff like that. We just had the Plone conference in Seattle. We had 300 people showing up, which is interesting because we're not that visible in the Python world, and there's still like a massive audience out there because we do different things than Python does. And it's kind of the broader your application becomes, the more people are potentially interested in it, but the more complex the application becomes. So. Anyway, so I don't know. Anything else you want to know about? Oh, I'm from Norway. I just moved to San Francisco. So.
Coldest day of the year.
Yes. No, I've been here for about a year, but don't tell anyone. Officially, I came to the US a couple of months ago. So I've been here for a year. But just leaving every 90 days,
And you can buy the videotape off Russell on the way out?
We'll have to censor that.
But just to note in passing, I mean, even the fundamental question, how do I make money? How do I make a stable livelihood out of open source software?
Yeah, sure. I mean,
a lot of people give the right arm to know a good answer to that.
Right. So that's one of the things that I'm really happy about Plone is the whole, how many people have started their own businesses based on it. It's just astounding, and it's so. That's the thing that makes me most happy about Plone is how many people we have empowered, I guess, to go and create their own businesses and go through that. How do I run a business? But at least they don't need to worry about how do I sell my application. They literally have people banging their doors down to implement things because in the Plone world right now there is so much demand and so few developers. So it's a very fortunate situation to be in, and I can see how it's harder to sell something like Python because Python is a framework, not an application. So, but I'm sure there are good ways of latching onto one of the frameworks in Python and spinning that in a way that you actually sell, something useful. I mean, pick up Django, pick up TurboGears. You can essentially do anything. You need to pick something. You can just put on your website, I will do anything with Python. So that whole thing, I don't know. I can probably add something there or talk some about that. And I'd be happy to give talks about Plone. I'm not sure I could give it in a technically interesting way for you guys because at a certain point I just say it just works, Like I don't know why things are built the way they are or stuff like that. I can give you the high level overview, which is essentially, a lot of times that's what you need to see if you want to do it or not.
So the tape is available now from Donna's first Plone talk from last year?
Right. I haven't actually seen her present ever. I know who she is. But, so there's actually a lot of good videos up now from the Plone conference on plone.org. So if you're interested in, scratching the surface, there is especially one by that is called Plone for PHP people. But I mean, it could be called Plone for any kind of people. It goes through a lot of the things that Plone does in a very fun way. The presenter is amazing. He mixes drinks by the end of his presentation. He's just very laid back and talks about what Plone does on a very high level and how he used it for his stuff at NASA and stuff like that. So
okay, cool.
Yep.
Some of us have rarely seen it.
Actually, if you could.
Okay.
Sorry. Or speak very much louder.
All right.
Some of us have hardly seen a project where there's a lead on the project who cannot work on the code, or do very much with the code, not consulting. I'm sure you can follow it, but it's very interesting to hear you talk about this and like put that in your talk, just like how that's changed things, and
Right.
I'm sure you ask for things in a different order and in a different way than if you actually were thinking about the suffering of the coder who had to do them.
Sure, definitely. So
And also, could you do some of the comparison between Python and Clone? As like, in what type of application this is better in what type of application
Sure.
in that?
Okay, so just for the tape, his question was, I'm probably one of the few project leaders that don't actually do code. So actually I do write a little bit of Python, but it's mostly like, this is a list, I don't want a list, let me make it a string. Stuff like that. It's super trivial, but just the fact that I can do it as a UI designer is pretty cool from from that perspective. And she wanted comparisons between things. So I'll just say up front that one of the notoriously difficult things to do with Clone is to compare it with anything, because it's not on any of those levels, and any of the things that I would compare Clone to, you haven't heard of. It's things like, on the high end you have Documentum and Vignette and those kind of things. You have Red Dot, you have other content management systems. You don't really say, this is Clone and this is PHP. PHP is on a totally different level. But I'll try. I mean, and there are a lot of things that if you see these patterns in your problem, yes, you need a content management system. If you don't see them, probably Clone is not for you. So I can try to do something like that.
Or from the end user perspective, like I just want my site to do X, Y, and Z.
Yep.
So
also,
for example, Donna was showing us how you want to have a discussion, you want to add a discussion, box on the end of an article.
Yep.
So that's one of the key selling points.
Right.
From her point of view.
So what he was talking about is also how, Clone is driven from two things, essentially business needs. Like if a business comes to us and say, we want Clone to do this, hopefully that will get merged back if it's generally useful. And the other thing is end user driven. I used to do a lot of training, which is an excellent way of doing paid user testing. Don't tell anybody I said this. You get paid really well to see how people screw up with your application, which is amazing. You stand there and you're like, how on earth could they not get that? Like you spent like hours constructing this thing, and the tiniest thing trips them up, and all your fantastic workflow and magnificent UI doesn't get used because they don't get past that one little brick that is in the road that they could just step over or ignore. And that's pretty sobering experience. I don't know how much user testing you've done of your applications, but just put it in front of your mom or your girlfriend or whatever and just see what they do with it. And it's just amazing to see how that affects it. And drive applications that way is an interesting way too.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway,
okay, cool. So there's critical mass for Clone.
Here, so.
There's definitely a critical mass, and there's a bunch of different ways to come at it and compare it to other frameworks.
So one of the things I always mention, this will be my last thing, hopefully.
the Strifey cane is coming out.
It is just how big it is. Like we have 200 developers, which a lot of people have no idea that we have that many people working. There is about 500 add-on products, which is insane. And a lot of them are bad, which is a huge problem because people install randomly. You've seen people with computers, right? They install anything that is downloadable and installable. And when you do that with something that runs your website, things are bound to happen. So a lot of interesting things with eggs and stuff like that. We're trying to move to eggs. I would like to know more about eggs, stuff like that. So there's a lot of interesting.
Meeting eggs in
Yep.
minutes, and we've got two other people waiting.
Yeah. So I was going to suggest we got a couple of people waiting to come. So.
And then let's end on time.
Yes. Any of the people who haven't spoken, who want to make a brief comment about who they are and what they want out of the group, would be great.
Hi, my name's Mark. I had a very deep immersion what's the trial by fire with Python a couple of years ago when I joined OSAF and became one of the build engineer for the Chandler project. I had not worked in Python at all. I was struggling with Perl, which I thought was one of the most arcane and bizarre languages I've ever encountered in over 35 years of programming. But Python I picked up in a snap, and I found it really extremely flexible and versatile and just really easy to understand. Now I'm back, I'm out of OSAF and I'm working at another company, and trying to struggle to see how I can put the build system that we've got currently into the kind of a wrapper that OSAF was using, and I'm curious to know if there are other build engineers in the audience here that might want to share some ideas. And I'd just like to hear about all the wonderful things that people can do with Python. And just thought I'd put in a plug for my other interest, which happens to be a nonprofit that helps to support people with ADD and ADHD, which I find that a lot of really clever and creative people happen to have this particular affliction, and there's relief for us. So if anybody wants to learn about that, come see me afterwards. Thanks.
Sure thing. Yeah, I mean, I was going to comment. I think build automation, it's one of those key things that's breaking through. You know, it's not the world's most sexy topic, so you don't get keynotes about it, but there's a lot of people out there doing it. And if we can get them to share their experiences, that would be great.
I'd like to very briefly switch business cards or contact information with any of those who might want to speak, so I can coordinate.
Okay. So is there anybody else going once before we close? Anybody who wants to, Ken?
Including the networking.
Are we going to map?
Come on.
Just
Try and get there.
brief mapping announcement. I said that I'd be here with job opportunity for people with game programming experience who want to write in Python. And let me know. Yeah, the ICC Internet Chess Club needs somebody. So let me know.
Okay, so if we're going to move to the mapping, then I'll close out on this. I'll put the slides up and the SQL, and Dennis is now going to briefly chair this.
Who's here for the first time? Basically, what we do is, no, I'm not, this isn't tape. What we're doing now is mapping, where we stand up, give very short 30-second or so announcements comparable to a Google AdWords, you know, just a few words indicating what your interests are, what you would like to talk with other people about. This is not your home page. This is not your mission statement. It's just an announcement of what you're interested in. So if we do rapid fire and then break it into many interactions.